What if nature gave us a 48-hour warning before the end of everything? The sky over Yellowstone National Park glowed with an unusual amber hue that evening, like fire trying to punch through the clouds. A low, steady rumble vibrated the ground beneath the feet of tourists clustered near Old Faithful, their phones raised, waiting for the world's most famous geyser to do what it had done for centuries. But this time was different. The rumble deepened, becoming a sharp crack that echoed through the valley like thunder trapped underground. Then, without warning, the geyser shot 30 feet higher than normal, the water a strange rust orange, steaming violently in the frigid mountain air. A little girl screamed, dogs barked, and birds took flight in chaotic patterns overhead. Within minutes, seismic alarms began blaring inside a modest-looking monitoring station 15 miles from the eruption site, where Dr. Emily Carter sat alone, coffee cooling beside her keyboard, eyes fixed on the red spikes climbing her screen. She didn't blink. This wasn't just a random tremor or even an above-average hydrothermal flare. This was a pattern. And it was one she hadn't seen in her 15 years as a geologist with the USGS. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed a command to open subsurface thermal maps, then another to access deep borehole data. Everything screamed pressure, rising too fast, too hot, too deep. Emily swore under her breath, pushing her chair back and pacing. She called her supervisor, Dr. Langston, but it went straight to voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message, grabbed her notebook, and scrawled the time, 7:42 p.m. The moment Yellowstone whispered something it hadn't in over 600,000 years. She didn't go home that night. Meanwhile, headlines exploded across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Yellowstone supervolcano. Eruption warning. End of the world. Panic danced with misinformation. Yet no official statement came. Emily, still in the bunker-like lab near Madison Junction, was the only one connecting the dots, not just unusual geyser activity, but harmonic tremors below the surface and the sudden migration of elk and bears. Even the birds were vanishing. At 3:27 a.m., she received a text from her daughter, Lily, "Mom. Are you okay? My phone says the volcano's gonna blow." Emily's heart squeezed. She had promised Lily to be home by dinner. Another broken promise. "I'm okay," she typed. "Just working late. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't. For days, Emily had noticed discrepancies in thermal vent data and dismissed them as instrumentation faults. But now, staring at the maps, it was clear, magma was rising. Something had destabilized the chamber. The air felt heavier, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The lab smelled faintly of sulfur. At dawn, Dr. Langston arrived, bleary-eyed and chewing antacids. He downplayed the eruption, calling it a seasonal anomaly. Emily confronted him with the data, the rising pressure curves, the subsurface temperature jumps. He frowned, scrolled through the graphs, and closed the window without a word. "Don't share this outside the agency," he said sharply. "We don't want to start a panic." Emily stared at him, stunned. "People are already panicking. That geyser nearly injured a dozen tourists. Exactly why we say nothing. Let it cool off. We'll monitor." He left, leaving Emily with a sick feeling in her gut. That night, she drove home, headlights cutting through thickening fog. Lily waited on the porch, arms crossed, backpack by her feet. "You forgot about my science fair," she said coldly. "Again." Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. There's been a lot happening at work." "You always say that. Are you even coming to my play next week?" Emily hugged her, but Lily didn't hug back. That silence hurt more than the earth's tremors. Over dinner, the news played muted on the TV. A Chiron read, "Elon Musk tweets about Yellowstone, maybe time to tap that geothermal energy." Emily blinked. Of course he would chime in. Ever since Musk's SpaceX team started tinkering with geothermal solutions for Mars colonization, he'd been vocal about the potential of volcanoes as a global energy source. But this? She poured herself a glass of wine, stared at the data on her laptop, and felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just about science. It was about survival. And yet, she was being told to stay silent. That night, the ground shook again, gently but persistently, like a giant knocking from beneath the crust. At school, Lily and her classmates were told to practice earthquake drills. Emily knew that if the caldera went, drills wouldn't help. The next day, she returned to the lab to find new logs on the servers. Data scrubbed, gaps in the pressure charts, an email trail that showed edits to sensor outputs. Someone was sanitizing the story. She took screenshots. She couldn't let this go. But who would believe her? Her phone buzzed, an encrypted message from a colleague at Stanford: "Your Geyser data. You're right. Don't trust Langston." That was all. Emily stared at it for a long time. Her heart pounded. If Stanford was seeing the same signals, this wasn't paranoia. This was real. She called her friend back, whispering from the lab hallway. "What are you seeing?" "Magma plume shift. Deeper than 2009, but wider. There's no precedent for this. Can it erupt? We're talking decades. Maybe. But the venting pattern is weird. It's like the system's trying to relieve pressure, but it's clogged." Emily ran through the implications. If the vents were blocked and pressure kept building, they could face a phreatic explosion. And that could trigger a collapse. She barely slept, alternating between calculations and watching Lily sleep in her room. The next morning, she stood at the kitchen sink, watching birds swirl away from the tree line like they sensed what humans refused to see. And then her phone rang. Unknown number. A calm voice on the other end: "Dr. Carter, this is Elon Musk. I think we need to talk about Yellowstone." She almost dropped the phone. How did you get my number?" "Friends in science. Your data got around. You're not crazy." "I didn't say I was. We're flying a group of experts to Denver. I want you there. We need real eyes on this. Not filtered reports." "What's the agenda?" "To figure out whether the planet's about to blow up. And if not, how to keep it that way." Emily hesitated. She was a federal employee. She wasn't cleared to share anything. But every instinct told her this was bigger than bureaucracy. She agreed. The call ended. She stared at the sink, water running over her hands. Lily walked in, rubbing her eyes. "Mom. What's going on?" Emily knelt down, brushing hair from Lily's face. "Something might be wrong at the park, honey. I have to go to a meeting. With important people. But I'll be home soon. I promise." "Is it dangerous?" "I don't know yet." And that was the truth. She didn't know. But she was going to find out. The mountain whispered warnings, and the ground trembled with secrets buried for eons. The question now was whether anyone would listen before it was too late. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The hum of the plane engine dulled her thoughts as Dr. Emily Carter stared out the window at the Rocky Mountains below, peaks like frozen waves cresting under a heavy sky. She hadn't flown in over 2 years, not since her marriage ended, not since she stopped believing she could afford to be away from her daughter for more than a day. But now she was flying toward a private summit organized by Elon Musk, one she hadn't even had time to fully research before boarding the jet Musk had sent, shared with 2 other scientists who hadn't spoken a word since takeoff. She closed her eyes and let herself slip backward in time, to the firelight flicker of her childhood living room in Montana, where she first fell in love with volcanoes. Her father, Harold Carter, a blue-collar mining engineer with permanently stained hands and a baritone voice, used to read her books about the Earth's core, magma flows, tectonic rifts. "The world is alive, he used to say. It breathes slow, but it breathes. And sometimes, it shouts." He died when she was 11, buried in a collapse deep in the Montana limestone caverns. After that, Emily's mother changed. Her warmth vanished like smoke. Their house became silent, their dinner conversation sparse. Her mother resented Harold's risk-taking, blamed his death on pride. Emily, instead, inherited that pride. It drove her through college, through nights buried in thermal imaging data, through field expeditions in Alaska and Iceland. It had cost her friendships, sleep, even her marriage. But it had earned her something else, clarity. And now, staring down at the same landscape her father once showed her from their old Chevy truck, she felt like he was still whispering in her ear, telling her to look deeper. She had always seen the world through layers, geological, emotional, human. But not everyone could. Her ex-husband certainly couldn't. Brian was a charming, pragmatic software engineer who once said her obsession with volcanoes was like dating someone in a constant relationship with a rock. He didn't understand the lure of something ancient and unpredictable, something powerful enough to reshape continents. When Lily was born, they tried harder. But parenting proved more difficult than equations. Brian drifted away, and Emily, though broken-hearted, let him go. She loved him, but not enough to stop being who she was. Lily had been the one thing they agreed on, and since the divorce, Emily fought every day to keep their connection strong. She packed bento box lunches, wrote notes in her daughter's math folders, memorized every line of Lily's school play, even if she missed the actual performance. But something was always in the way: work, worry, science. That constant push to keep the world from ending while her personal world quietly cracked beneath her feet. The jet landed quietly at a small airfield outside Denver, where black SUVs waited. A driver with a tablet bearing her name greeted her and ushered her into a vehicle with tinted windows and no conversation. The road to the Summit Center, a high-security facility nestled in the foothills, curled like a snake around pine groves and pale cliffs. As they drove, she tried to gather herself, wondering what kind of minds Musk had assembled. The thought of meeting him in person made her stomach tighten, not from awe, but from uncertainty. She respected his brilliance but distrusted his spectacle. When they arrived, a voiceprint scanner let her through the glass entry. Inside, the facility was sleek and clinical, lined with data screens, whiteboards, and several familiar faces from academic conferences. She spotted Dr. Camille Reyes, a geothermal physicist from Caltech, Professor Arjun Mahadevan from MIT, a specialist in volcanic modeling, and, at the center of it all, Elon Musk himself, casual in black jeans and a dark blazer, pacing, animated, talking to an engineer about subsurface mapping drones. When he saw Emily, he nodded. "Dr. Carter. The woman of the week." His voice was direct but not arrogant. "Your Geyser data stirred quite the buzz. Welcome to the war room." She nodded cautiously. "Thanks for bringing me in. I assume you saw the harmonic tremor patterns." He grinned slightly. "Oh, I saw them. That's why we're here. We're not here to panic, we're here to solve. Or at least try." The next 8 hours unfolded in rapid-fire presentations. Maps of magma chambers. Fluid dynamics simulations. Earthquake overlays. Some showed doomsday outcomes. Others offered scenarios of controlled venting. One model proposed drilling thermal shafts to relieve pressure gradually, but it carried risks. If done wrong, it could trigger the very eruption they were trying to prevent. Musk's team had already developed prototypes for Mars-based geothermal systems. Now they wanted to adapt the same tech to Yellowstone. Emily remained skeptical. She raised concerns about geological integrity, potential chain reactions, and the simple fact that Yellowstone wasn't a lab, it was a sleeping giant with a temper. Musk listened, occasionally interrupted, occasionally pressed for clarity. At one point, when the group debated the odds of a blowout in the next 30 days, Emily cut in sharply, "The problem isn't just timing. It's the instability of the system. We're looking at a perfect storm of pressure buildup, caprock degradation, and blocked vents. If the system can't breathe, it breaks. You don't wait for the bomb to tick, you act like it already is." The room went quiet. Then Musk said, "So what do you suggest we do?" She exhaled. "Run new models based on real-time vent pressure, not last month's averages. Use your drones. Drop sensors directly into the Norris Geyser Basin and into Heart Lake. Map in 3 dimensions. If it's moving, we'll see it. If it's not, we can sleep for now." Musk nodded. Done. That night, alone in the quarters they provided her, Emily stared at a screen showing live footage of Yellowstone from multiple cameras. She zoomed in on the upper geyser basin. Still. Too still. Her phone buzzed. A video message from Lily. "Hi Mom. I saw your name on TikTok. Are you famous now?" Lily smiled but her eyes were wary. "I hope you're okay. I made a drawing for you. It's a volcano, but it's smiling." Emily laughed softly, tears in her eyes. She hit record. "Hey, baby. I miss you. I'm okay. Just helping with something important. Your volcano made my day." She hit send, then sat back and let herself feel the weight of it all. She had always believed science could save people. But tonight, she realized it might have to save everyone. The next morning, they flew her back to Montana to rejoin the monitoring station. Elon had dispatched a private drone crew to begin sensor drops. For the first time in days, Emily felt less alone. Someone powerful believed her. Someone with the resources to act. Yet something still gnawed at her. A feeling. A memory. The night before her father's death, he had taken her up on a ridge and pointed to the earth beneath them. "There's a fire down there that never goes out," he'd said. "It sleeps, but it remembers." Now, as she walked back into the lab and reopened the buried data files Langston had scrubbed, she knew he'd been right. The earth was remembering. And it was about to remind them all. The morning sun lit the forest canopy outside the Yellowstone monitoring station with a soft gold that belied the tension crackling beneath the surface of the earth. Emily Carter stood at her workstation, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk, her eyes locked on the ever-rising red lines of seismic data scrolling across the main monitor. Every hour brought a new tremor, every tremor a slightly different pattern, yet all of them echoed the same truth: something beneath Yellowstone was shifting, swelling, preparing. The old adage in her field was that volcanoes don't explode without warning. But this one was different. This one was giving off warnings no one seemed willing to hear. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could carry the weight of silence. Behind her, the buzz of office chatter continued as if none of it were real, as if they were still living in the version of the world where Yellowstone was a wonder, not a weapon. Langston passed by her desk without a word, his eyes fixed ahead, jaw tight. He knew. She knew he knew. The edits in the data logs, the altered readings, the delays in alert level adjustments, he wasn't just complicit, he was leading the suppression. She'd confronted him once already, but he'd waved her off with bureaucratic non-answers about public safety and chain of command. This time, she didn't bother going to him. She was done waiting for permission to speak the truth. She typed out an encrypted message to Camille Reyes and Arjun Mahadevan from the summit: "Pressure spike confirmed in Norris. Sensor 36 offline. Something's happening." Langston still blocking alerts. She hit send, heart pounding. Within minutes, Camille replied, "Satellite infrared confirms temp rise. Suggest whistleblower action." Emily stared at those words. Whistleblower action. The phrase felt too dramatic, too final. But as another tremor rattled the building, causing a clipboard to fall from a nearby desk. She knew it might be the only option. She opened a secure transfer program and began copying raw sensor data from the last 72 hours onto a thumb drive she kept hidden behind a stack of technical manuals. As it loaded, she glanced at the screen displaying Yellowstone's live thermal imaging and noticed a hotspot forming near the edge of the Sour Creek Dome, an area not known for activity this early in the season. Another anomaly. Another warning. At lunch, she stepped outside into the chill air and dialed Jake's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice familiar, steady. You okay? No, she said, her voice low. It's getting worse. I think they're trying to suppress it. What do you need? She paused. The truth was, she didn't know what she needed. Support? An ally? Someone who wouldn't think she was losing it. I need to get into the northern perimeter. Sensor access at Pelican Cone. That's closed off. Off-season protocol. Can you get me in? A beat of silence. Yeah. Meet me at the Fire Road entrance in an hour. She hung up, heart racing, and ducked back inside to grab her field pack. As she passed Langston's office, she saw him on the phone, his back to the window. She didn't stop. She didn't speak. She walked straight out. The drive was quiet, the trees around them flashing past like watchful sentinels. Jake drove his old green truck like he had in college, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the window. Emily hadn't been alone with him in years, and now wasn't the time to unpack their history, but there was something comforting about his presence, the way he never pushed, never doubted her instincts. What exactly are we looking for? He asked finally, eyes flicking toward her. Confirmation. I've got a pressure anomaly that doesn't make sense. If the vent's blocked, we'll see distortion in the soil. Swelling. Maybe even steam. Jesus, Jake muttered. And Langston's ignoring this? Actively covering it up. Why? I don't know. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he was told to. Jake grunted but said nothing more. They parked near the fire gate, and Jake led the way through the underbrush, stepping over fallen branches and crunching frost. The hike took 30 minutes uphill, and when they crested the ridge, Emily felt the heat before she saw it, a wave of warmth rising from the earth like a breath. The ground looked damp, despite no recent rain. Thin wisps of steam drifted lazily from fissures she was certain hadn't been there a month ago. She dropped to one knee, unzipped her pack, and pulled out a handheld thermal scanner. The readings flashed red, hotter than the surrounding ground by nearly 80 degrees Fahrenheit. She moved to a second spot. Same. Third spot, hotter. It's venting underground, she whispered. But it's trapped. No outlet. Jake knelt beside her. What does that mean? It means pressure's building. Like a blocked artery. Eventually, it blows. She stood and took a photo, then another. She recorded a short video. As she turned to leave, a distant rumble rolled through the earth. Birds launched from the trees in a frantic burst of wings. The tremor lasted only 6 seconds, but they both felt it, the kind of quake that doesn't shake buildings but shakes your bones. Back at the station, Emily uploaded the sensor footage and attached it to an anonymous email, addressed to a select list of independent volcanologists, media contacts, and disaster preparedness officials. She didn't use her name. She didn't sign it. She just hit send. It was out now. No turning back. That evening, she tried to explain it all to Lily as they sat on the couch eating microwaved mac and cheese. There's something happening at the park, she said carefully. Like an earthquake? Lily asked. Sort of. The land's changing. I'm trying to help figure it out so people stay safe. Lily looked at her, eyes big and trusting. Will it explode? Emily hesitated. Probably not. But I'm making sure we're ready. Just in case. Do you promise? Emily blinked, her throat tight. I promise to do everything I can. That night, she stayed up watching news feeds. One channel ran a segment titled Supervolcano Hysteria, Science or Clickbait. Another ran a leaked version of her data under the headline, Whistleblower warns of imminent Yellowstone threat. Her stomach twisted. She was the leak. And now, she was the story. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, "We see you. Shut it down." Last warning. No name. No trace. Her hands went cold. But her resolve hardened. She wasn't shutting anything down. She was just getting started. The ground had spoken. The signals were real. And now the world was finally listening. Emily woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the darkness around her thick and oppressive like the walls were closing in. The echo of the tremor she'd felt yesterday seemed to linger in her bones, like her body remembered what the earth was trying to say even if her mind hadn't caught up yet. She reached over and checked her phone. No new messages. No threats. No updates. The world was quiet on the surface, but she could feel the rumble of something deeper building in places no seismic meter could reach, her conscience, her family, her life's balance. Downstairs, Lily was already awake, packing her lunch with a solemn efficiency that broke Emily's heart a little. Her daughter had grown up too fast, molded by the absence of consistency, of parents who passed each other like satellites in different orbits. "Do you have to go in early again?" Lily asked without looking up. "Not today," Emily said, though she knew it was a lie. "I'll walk you to the bus." Lily hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Okay." They walked together in silence through the brisk morning air, boots crunching on frost-hardened grass, the rising sun casting long shadows ahead of them. At the bus stop, Emily turned to her daughter, wanting to say something meaningful, something permanent. "I know I've been distracted. But I'm listening now. I'm really trying to be here, for you." Lily looked up at her with the kind of old soul gaze children wore when they'd had to grow strong before their time. "I know, Mom. Just don't be brave for everyone else and forget about me." The words hit Emily harder than any tremor. She nodded, kissed Lily's forehead, and watched the bus take her away, shrinking into the distance. Back at the monitoring station, things had shifted overnight. People avoided eye contact. Conversations paused when she entered the room. Her data access had been restricted, files she had viewed freely just a day earlier now required higher clearance. Langston's door remained shut, the blinds drawn. A silent war had begun, and Emily knew she was on the front lines alone. At 11:17 a.m., she received an internal message marked urgent. It was from someone she didn't know in the Washington field office. "Watch your 6. Your leak made waves. DHS is asking questions." She stared at the screen, bile rising in her throat. She'd known this was possible, even likely, but knowing and feeling it were two different things. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Camille. "Emergency meeting. Private line. Now." Emily slipped out of the building, walked down the back path toward the ranger cabins, and dialed in. Camille, Arjun, and two others she recognized from the summit were already online. "They're going to shut you down," Camille said without preamble. "Langston's been on calls with DC since this morning. They think you're trying to create mass hysteria." "I'm trying to keep people alive," Emily snapped. "This isn't about fear. It's about transparency. If this system breaches, no one within 500 miles is safe. You know that." "We do," Arjun replied calmly. "Which is why we're moving ahead without official clearance. We've got Musk's drones in the air as of an hour ago. Data should be streaming to your old private server. It's not secure, but it's fast. Just, don't talk about it inside the agency." "Got it," Emily said, heart pounding. Anything new from Norris? Vent 14 is pulsing. Pressure spikes every 3 minutes. It's acting like a clogged artery about to burst. Then we're closer than we thought. She hung up, head spinning. The timeline was collapsing. What she thought were weeks could be days. Hours, even. That evening, Jake stopped by her house without calling. He looked tired, worried, holding 2 takeout containers and a 6-pack. Thought you could use company, he said. She let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, eating in silence. He finally spoke. You're scared. I'm not scared for me. I'm scared for everyone else. For Lily. For people who won't know what hit them because no one told them the truth. Then tell them. And lose my job. Maybe get arrested. Since when did that stop you? She looked at him, eyes full of storm. It's not just about science anymore, Jake. It's politics. Optics. Liability. If they say I'm lying, the story dies. And then people die with it. So find a way to make them listen. After dinner, Jake helped her move her equipment to a backup location, an abandoned ranger station he had keys to from his days with park services. There, they set up her laptop, a portable generator, and a receiver for the drone data. At midnight, the first feed came in. Real-time thermal maps of the caldera, geyser basin, and venting fields. The readings confirmed her worst fear: the system was destabilizing faster than predicted. The crust above the magma chamber was thinning. She could see it in the thermal fractures spreading like veins across the western dome. At 2:04 a.m., she hit record and began speaking. My name is Dr. Emily Carter. I'm a geologist with the United States Geological Survey, and I need you to listen. What's happening beneath Yellowstone is unprecedented. The geothermal system is overloaded, the natural venting structures are failing, and pressure is building faster than our models predicted. This is not a drill. I am speaking to you because those in power are choosing silence. But silence won't save lives. Information will. She posted it to every platform she could think of: YouTube, TikTok, X, Telegram, Reddit. Within an hour, the video had 20,000 views. By dawn, it had 2 million. She turned off her phone to avoid the noise. The next morning, the world knew her name, and it wouldn't be long before the consequences arrived. Lily came downstairs holding her tablet. Mom, you're on the internet. Emily nodded, brushing hair from her daughter's eyes. Yeah, baby. I am. Are you gonna get in trouble? Probably. Are you still gonna fix it? I'm going to try. That morning, as the wind swept across the mountains and the sky turned a strange yellow-gray, Emily knew she had crossed a fault line, not just in the earth, but in her life. And there was no going back. The silence before disaster isn't truly silent. It hums. It pulses. It's in the subtle drift of birds away from nesting grounds, in the trembling paws of animals fleeing places they've lived for generations, and in the low, uneven pressure Emily Carter felt in her ears every time she stepped outside. Yellowstone had started whispering louder. And she was running out of ways to make the world listen. Her video had gone viral overnight, ricocheting across news cycles and social platforms. Scientists, preppers, and conspiracy theorists alike were all spinning theories, dissecting her voice, her charts, her urgency. Some praised her for bravery. Others accused her of fear-mongering. DHS had not reached out yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, local law enforcement had increased patrols around the park, citing vandalism threats and unauthorized scientific activity, though it was clear to Emily and Jake that the true motive was information control. When she returned to the ranger station they had converted into a makeshift lab, the generator was still humming and the drone data continued to feed in, but the thermal imaging had changed. The cracks she had observed yesterday had doubled. A new cluster of deep tremors, short, violent bursts of seismic activity, had appeared under the western edge of the caldera. That was new. That was dangerous. She ran the timestamps and noticed they were following a pattern. A wave, every 4 hours, each one increasing in magnitude. She ran it again. Same result. She felt a cold sweat trickle down her back. The system wasn't random. It was pulsing. Like something alive. And if it was alive, it was trying to get out. She called Camille, who answered on the second ring with a voice raw from lack of sleep. "We see it too," Camille said before Emily could speak. "It's rhythmic. Like a pressure valve clenching. Arjun thinks the chamber's forming a new vent system under pressure. That would explain the fracturing. Or the start of one. Has anyone told the USGS main office? They're on lockdown. Internal review. I think Langston's pushing a narrative that you fabricated data." Emily clenched her jaw. "Of course he is. But we're getting you backing. Quietly. A few respected volcanologists are asking the right questions. We just need time. We don't have time. How long do you think?" Emily looked at the graphs, then out the window toward the mountains. "If the pulse pattern continues? Maybe 48 hours before the ground itself starts rupturing. Maybe less." "Okay," Camille said. "Then we get ahead of it. Release the full drone scan. Unedited. Public domain." Emily hesitated. That would cross a line. That would be classified data from private and semi-government research vessels. But if it showed what she thought it did, it would blow the story wide open. "Do it," she said. "I'll deal with the fallout." That afternoon, the drone footage appeared on every major news site and platform, showing heat blooms beneath Yellowstone like blood vessels about to burst. Scientists began weighing in on mainstream channels. Some cautiously acknowledged the anomalies. Others denied their severity. But the public perception had shifted. Panic spread in slow ripples: hotel cancellations, fuel lines in surrounding towns, food shortages at general stores. FEMA deployed monitoring support teams, but stopped short of calling it a disaster. Still, the signs were clear. Yellowstone's whisper was now a murmur, and people were finally tilting their heads to listen. Emily tried to stay grounded. She made Lily dinner and sat with her to do homework by candlelight when the power flickered. She kept her phone nearby, but silenced notifications. Her daughter needed peace, even if only within these four walls. "Are we leaving?" Lily asked quietly over mashed potatoes. Emily looked up. "Not yet. What if it blows up? Then we'll go. We'll have a plan. Promise?" "Promise." Later that night, Emily and Jake returned to the ranger station to review the new seismic logs. The pulses had increased again, now every 3 hours and 32 minutes. The pattern was accelerating. Jake sat across from her, looking at the monitor like he'd seen a ghost. "It's coming, isn't it?" "Yes," Emily said without blinking. "But we still don't know how big or how fast. What do we do?" She looked at the chalkboard where she'd written equations in red marker. "We warn the world. Again. We escalate. And we give people what the government won't, options." She opened her laptop, went live. "To everyone watching, this is Dr. Emily Carter. I've spent 15 years studying geothermal systems. What's happening beneath Yellowstone is no longer hypothetical. We are watching, in real time, the signs of possible phreatic eruption and pressure displacement at a level we've never documented in this park. I'm not telling you to panic. I'm telling you to prepare. Evacuate if you live within 300 miles. Pack for relocation. Get gas. Get food. Make a plan. Do not wait for permission. The earth won't wait either. This time the video spread even faster. Influencers reposted it. Emergency broadcast systems were flooded with calls. News anchors ran her voice over B-roll footage of geysers, bison stampedes, and tourists crying as they packed cars in Jackson, Wyoming. The official USGS response was vague. We are aware of increasing geothermal activity in the Yellowstone region and are working with multiple agencies to assess the situation. At this time, we are not recommending evacuation. But no one believed them anymore. They believed her. The next day, Emily's photo was on the front page of every major outlet. Whistleblower. Hero. Alarmist. Criminal. They couldn't decide what to call her, but they couldn't ignore her either. Camille called to say she'd been subpoenaed. Arjun had been placed on academic leave. Someone had hacked Emily's email and leaked personal texts to journalists. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. Because just before midnight, Sensor 14 stopped transmitting. When Emily accessed the backup feed, she saw why. The camera had gone blind, buried in a landslide of boiling mud and rock. Vent 14 had ruptured. And with it, the countdown had begun. She turned to Jake, who stood in the doorway holding 2 backpacks. We go now, he said. Tonight. She nodded, scooped up her hard drives and Lily's drawing from the table. As they drove down the mountain, the night sky behind them lit faintly orange. Yellowstone had stopped whispering. It was finally screaming. The road out of Yellowstone twisted through shadowed pine and trembling ground, the forest on either side no longer just a backdrop to history but a silent witness to what was about to unfold. Emily drove fast, knuckles white against the wheel, headlights slicing through fog and smoke as Jake sat beside her monitoring the live drone feeds from the dashboard-mounted tablet. In the back seat, Lily clutched her stuffed moose and stared out the window, silent but not asleep, too old and too aware now to pretend this was just another family drive. They were 35 miles from the park boundary when the first wave hit. A low, thunderous sound like a freight train passing just beneath the earth, followed by a vibration that made the steering wheel tremble and the windshield rattle. Emily pulled over instinctively, heart hammering as she threw the car into park and stepped out into the night. The sound was everywhere, not just heard but felt, as if the mountains were exhaling their first deep breath in centuries. Overhead, stars flickered against a sky that now glowed faintly at the western horizon, not from moonlight but from something rising, something burning beneath the crust. Jake joined her by the hood, his face pale and tight. That was it, wasn't it? No, she said, watching the trees sway against a breeze that hadn't existed a second ago. That was the warning shot. Back inside the car, Lily whispered, "Is the volcano mad?" Emily turned around, trying to soften her voice. "It's not mad, sweetie. It's just, waking up. Sometimes the earth has to change. It's how it stays alive. And we have to move with it." She didn't know if Lily understood, but the girl nodded slowly and held her moose closer. They drove through the early hours of the morning, past ranger blockades now abandoned, through towns where lights flickered and streets were empty except for the hum of vehicles headed in the same direction, away. In Cody, Wyoming, they stopped for gas. The station was packed, people yelling, pumping, grabbing food in frenzied handfuls. A TV above the register showed emergency coverage, Emily's leaked drone footage, maps of projected ashfall, voiceover from reporters asking if this was the big one. She kept her head down, paid in cash, and got back in the car. She couldn't be the story right now. She had to be a mother. Had to be alive. As they pulled onto the highway, an emergency broadcast broke through the static on the radio. A mandatory evacuation is now in effect for the greater Yellowstone region. All residents within a 300-mile radius are advised to leave immediately. Ash containment protocols are being established. FEMA is coordinating with state and federal response teams. Please stay calm. Follow official routes. Jake turned the volume down, jaw set. Now they decide to speak. Too late, Emily muttered. They waited too long. By midday, the sky was yellow-gray, and ash had begun falling in soft, powdery flakes, coating windshields and trees like ghost snow. Emily knew this wasn't just harmless dust, it was glass, razor-fine volcanic silica that could slice through lungs if inhaled. She handed Lily a mask from the emergency kit and slipped one on herself. No matter what, keep this on, okay? Don't take it off until I say. Lily nodded, her voice muffled beneath the filter. I feel like a space explorer. Emily forced a smile. That's exactly what we are right now. They made it as far as Billings by evening, where the air was clearer and the roads widened into arteries of escape. The town was overflowing. Schools turned into shelters, churches into supply hubs, parking lots into refugee camps. Emily parked behind a grocery store and tried to check in with Camille, but her phone had no signal. Jake tried his satellite unit. After 5 minutes, a weak connection crackled to life, and Camille's voice came through, broken but clear enough. Vent 14 is gone. Blown wide open. A second fissure opened near Heart Lake. Magma's moving. Fast. How long? Emily asked. We're looking at hours, Emily. Not days. Hours. This is a worst-case scenario. Emily felt the world tilt, the weight of every calculation collapsing into raw instinct. She looked at Jake. We need to get farther out. Colorado. Maybe Utah. He nodded. I know a guy with a private cabin near Moab. Off-grid. Could be good shelter. They set off again as night fell, headlights dim through a curtain of dust. The further south they went, the thicker the traffic, the more erratic the drivers. Gas stations were tapped out. Power lines buzzed and flickered. Emily checked the sky every few minutes, watching for the telltale plume, the column that would mean it had finally happened. But it hadn't yet. Yellowstone was still holding its breath. Around 2 a.m., they pulled into a rest stop near the state line, far enough that the ash had thinned but not gone. Lily was asleep, curled up in the back seat under a blanket. Emily stepped outside, leaned against the car, and looked up. The stars were still visible, but dimmer. The horizon glowed faintly, like the sun was rising from the west. Jake joined her, handing her a bottle of water. We're ahead of the fallout, he said. Barely. It's not just ash I'm worried about. It's the shockwave. If it really erupts, the pressure release could trigger quakes across the entire continent. Infrastructure will fail. Planes grounded. They both turned, eyes locked on the northern sky. The glow on the horizon intensified, and the stars above it began to vanish behind something rising, something dark. Emily knew before the sound reached them. Before the wind shifted. Before the ash turned thick again. Yellowstone had erupted. The real eruption. The big one. And the countdown was over. The plume rose like a judgment in the night, black and red and seething with fury, a tower of ash and fire so high it disappeared into the stratosphere, blotting out stars and sending an apocalyptic shadow crawling across the landscape. Emily stood frozen beside the car, heart thundering in her chest, watching the horizon morph into something monstrous. The blast hadn't been audible yet, too far, but the sight alone was enough to collapse her thoughts into one primal message: run. Jake turned to her, face illuminated by the faint hellish glow now expanding over the horizon. We've got minutes before the first shockwave hits. Emily nodded, ran to the car, and opened the door gently so she wouldn't startle Lily. But the girl was already awake, staring at the sky through the side window, eyes wide and reflective behind her little mask. Is that the volcano? She asked. Yeah, Emily whispered. That's the volcano. They drove south in silence, joining the exodus of vehicles already fleeing down the interstate. Every station on the radio was either silent or replaced by the national emergency broadcast tone, followed by instructions too vague to help anyone still close enough to need them. Stay indoors. Shelter in place. Avoid breathing ash. Emily kept checking the rearview mirror, but it was pointless. The cloud was massive, slow and eternal, and it would eventually cover everything. The first shockwave hit as they passed into Utah, an invisible wall of pressure that made their ears pop and the car rattle like it had been picked up and dropped. Lily screamed, clutching her stuffed moose, while Emily tightened her grip on the wheel and whispered reassurances that barely made it through her own fear. Jake checked the drone feed. It had gone offline completely. No signal, no image. The infrastructure that had once mapped Yellowstone like a heartbeat was now buried under a miles-deep suffocation of molten stone and glass dust. Ground Zero's gone, he said. Completely obliterated. Like a sun went off underground. How far does the ash go? Emily asked. Depends on the wind, but based on the speed of the plume. We're looking at thousands of miles. Continental impact. Flights will be grounded across the U.S. within hours. What about rain? Volcanic winters on the table. Global cooling, crop failure. And we haven't even seen what the magma field's going to do. Emily stared ahead at the highway, headlights flickering through the dust. This was no longer a geological event. It was a collapse, of systems, of civilization, of everything people thought they understood about safety and time. At sunrise, the sky looked alien, no blue, only a sickly yellow-orange, like the world had been set beneath a stained-glass dome. The sun was a red coin hanging low and heavy, casting no warmth. They pulled off the highway near a tiny town called Thistle and found a side road leading into the hills where Jake's friend's cabin was supposed to be. The roads were empty out here, eerily so. The trees were coated in a fine layer of ash, and the air smelled like burnt copper. The cabin itself was tucked into a ravine, surrounded by scrub oak and perched above a dry creek bed. Jake unlocked the gate, and they pulled in, dust trailing behind them like a signal flare. Emily stepped out and let the silence wash over her. It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring, like the earth was holding its breath after screaming. Inside the cabin, there was no power but plenty of supplies, canned food, water, propane tanks, sleeping bags. Jake lit a kerosene lamp while Emily set Lily up on the cot with a coloring book salvaged from the car. The girl still hadn't said much, but she was drawing volcanoes now, big ones, with families holding hands beneath them. Outside, the wind shifted, and a thick swirl of ash dust swept across the yard. Emily closed the windows and sealed the cracks with duct tape. The temperature had already dropped 10 degrees. That night, they huddled in the small living room listening to battery-powered radio transmissions, frantic chatter from emergency channels, FEMA broadcasts, amateur ham operators trying to coordinate aid convoys. One message caught Emily's ear: ashfall has reached Chicago. Visibility near zero. Power grids fluctuating. Hospitals overwhelmed. We need respirators. We need shelter. Jake turned it down, his expression grim. It's not just us anymore. This is global. It was always global, Emily said. It just took the sky to remind people. She tried to sleep that night but couldn't. Her thoughts kept circling, what she could have done differently, whether she should have leaked data sooner, if there was anything left of her lab, her co-workers, Langston. Maybe he'd escaped. Maybe he hadn't. At sunrise, she climbed the ridge behind the cabin, the world quiet and dead beneath a thin film of gray. The sky was darker than before, cloud cover thickening as the ash interacted with the jet stream. From up there, she could see the far edges of the horizon, and there, glowing like a second sun, was the plume, still rising, still feeding the atmospheric wound. Her phone buzzed weakly. A signal. 1 bar. She opened her messages and saw a flood of them. From strangers. From scientists. From students she didn't know were still following her work. From people in shelters, people on the run, people who had seen her video and left Yellowstone because of it. One read, "You saved my family. I didn't believe it until I saw it. Thank you." Another said, "Still breathing because of you." She swallowed hard. All the fear, the loss, the blame, it didn't erase this. She had made a difference. She pulled up the voice recorder on her phone and began speaking. "This is Dr. Emily Carter. For the record, Yellowstone has entered a full-scale eruptive event. The main caldera vented at 3:12 Mountain Time. Initial shockwaves suggest a VEI of at least 7. Ash dispersion models confirm fallout across the continental U.S. We expect global cooling, communication disruptions, and massive infrastructure failures. But we are still here. And as long as we are, we adapt. We learn. We endure." She paused, then added softly, to anyone listening, "Keep going. Don't wait for the world to fix itself. Be part of the rebuild." She sent the audio file to every contact she had, every news agency, every emergency relay. It was the only thing she could do now. That evening, Lily climbed up onto the ridge with her, holding 2 mugs of instant cocoa. "I made it with water from the blue jug," she said proudly. "Tastes weird, but warm." Emily took the mug, smiled, and looked out at the ash horizon. "You're very brave, you know. I was scared." "Me too. But we're okay, right?" Emily put an arm around her. "We are now. And we'll keep being okay, one day at a time." The wind carried another wave of dust over them, but it didn't matter. They were already covered in it. Survivors in a world reset by fire. But they had each other. And that, for now, was enough. The days blurred into a haze of ash and silence as Emily, Jake, and Lily settled into the cabin, the small refuge and island in a sea of gray desolation. Outside, the sky was no longer blue or even gray but a dense, swirling canvas of microscopic glass shards, silica dust that coated every surface and made breathing a slow, careful task. Each breath felt like inhaling fine needles, but masks helped, and the trio quickly learned to ration their filtered air, moving as little as possible to conserve energy. The world had gone quiet in other ways too. Cell phone signals flickered on and off, satellites fell dark one by one, and even the emergency radios began to lose contact with the outside. Emily's initial optimism faded each day as the ash layer thickened, clogging engines, blocking sunlight and poisoning the environment. She kept her journal, writing by lamplight, trying to capture every detail of the strange new reality, the brittle ashfall that shattered on contact, the eerie calm broken only by distant, unexplainable rumbles, and the growing hunger gnawing at their supplies. Jake spent long hours outside, carefully clearing the solar panels he had installed before the eruption, scraping the glassy dust that threatened to smother the fragile cells. "We need power," he said one morning, voice rough from coughing. "Without it, we're blind." Emily nodded, wiping ash from her goggles. She was grateful for his practical skills, they were the difference between surviving and giving up. Lily, once frightened and withdrawn, had adapted in ways that surprised them both. She learned to draw in the ash, making shapes of animals and trees that no longer grew, stories of a green world lost to fire and glass. Sometimes she sang softly, songs about hope and rain, a haunting lullaby that reminded Emily of a time before all this. Yet beneath the quiet resilience, tension simmered. The longer they stayed trapped under the silica skies, the more Emily worried about their health. Her scientific training told her the truth, the fine ash was like microscopic shards cutting lungs from the inside, causing silicosis, a slow and deadly disease. They had masks, but those were never designed for weeks or months of exposure. Every cough was a warning bell. One evening, as the last light faded behind the thickened atmosphere, Jake set up the satellite phone again, desperate for any news. After several attempts, a crackling voice broke through. "This is FEMA Regional Command. We're coordinating relief efforts but are currently overwhelmed. Estimated ashfall area exceeds expectations. Please maintain shelter in place and conserve resources. Further updates as available. The line went dead. Emily felt the weight of isolation settle deeper. How long until help arrives? Jake asked quietly. If it arrives. We can't think like that. I'm not, Emily said. But I have to prepare for the worst. That night, a fierce wind blew through the canyon, rattling windows and flinging ash against the walls like tiny knives. Lily woke, frightened by the noise, and Emily held her close, whispering promises of safety they both knew were fragile. Outside, the fire that had ignited in distant forests fanned by the volcanic heat roared closer. A red glow bled through the ash clouds, painting the sky with eerie, apocalyptic light. The cabin shook as a small tremor rolled beneath the earth, a reminder that the ground was still alive and angry. In the days that followed, the fire's approach forced them to evacuate the cabin. They packed the essentials, water, food, masks, a few precious photographs, and headed east on foot, carrying Lily through stretches where the ash was thickest. The landscape was surreal. Trees stood like skeletons, their branches coated in volcanic glass, rivers ran dark with sediment and sulfur, animals were nowhere to be seen. The ash horizon seemed endless, a graveyard of nature's former glory. At one point, Emily paused to catch her breath, the weight of survival pressing down on her chest. Do you think it will ever be normal again? She asked Jake, voice breaking. Normal is a word that died with the eruption, he replied, looking toward the distant mountains, barely visible through the haze. But maybe there's a new normal waiting for us. They crossed a dried-up lakebed, cracked and barren, and stumbled upon a group of survivors camped beneath a makeshift tarp. Faces were grim but eyes held a flicker of hope. They shared water and stories, news of distant cities gone dark, and whispered rumors of government bunkers and safe zones. Emily felt the fragile thread of humanity stretch and fray but not break. Each survivor carried their own scars, losses, and silent prayers. One man, a geologist named Marcus, spoke of the volcanic winter to come, explaining how ash particles high in the atmosphere would block sunlight for years, causing crop failures and economic collapse. Emily listened, the scientific certainty of it sinking like a stone in her stomach. The group decided to move together, pooling their knowledge and resources. Emily found herself thrust into a leadership role, her expertise suddenly vital not just for survival but for guiding decisions about routes, shelter, and health precautions. Each day was a struggle against exhaustion, starvation, and despair, but also a test of human endurance and cooperation. Along the way, Emily documented everything: the shifting weather patterns, the psychological toll on the group, the slow, creeping effects of the ash on lungs and spirit. Her scientific mind clung to data, a lifeline in a world unraveling. Lily, ever the light in the darkness, became a symbol of resilience, reminding them that even in the thickest ash, life could find a way. At night, Emily wrote a message she hoped would someday be found by others: we are the witnesses. We are the survivors. And in the silence of this ash-covered world, we learn what it means to live again. As the group reached a small town on the edge of the ashfall zone, they found it barely recognizable, a ghost town buried under gray, abandoned by those who fled before or succumbed to despair. But it had one thing left: a library with a working generator. Inside, surrounded by dusty books and flickering fluorescent lights, Emily felt a flicker of hope. They were not just surviving, they were preserving knowledge. And from knowledge, perhaps, would come the strength to rebuild. Outside, the silica skies stretched on, relentless and vast. But beneath them, the human spirit burned bright and unyielding, a beacon in the darkest ash storm. The ash kept falling like a cruel, unending snowstorm, each speck a microscopic dagger drifting through the air and settling on every inch of exposed skin, every surface, every hope. The group moved cautiously through the ruined town, the silence around them thick and unnatural, broken only by the crunch of their boots against ash-covered debris. Emily felt the weight of each step, not just physical but emotional, the sinking realization that the world they once knew had died beneath a suffocating blanket of volcanic glass dust. Inside the library, they found scattered newspapers and weathered maps, relics of a life that seemed impossibly distant. The generator hummed weakly, a fragile pulse of electricity in a place that had gone dark. Emily took inventory of supplies and the few functioning machines, radios, a laptop with a solar charger, and an old air filtration unit. "We have to make this place our base," she told Jake and Marcus. "At least for now. We can't keep moving blind through the ash." Jake nodded, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "If we can get the filtration system running, maybe we can clean the air in one room, give everyone a place to breathe easier." Lily sat quietly in a corner, sketching the landscape outside the cracked window, gray hills, twisted trees, and the distant glow of fires still burning beyond the horizon. Her drawings had become their way to remember the world as it was and dream of what it might be again. Days passed in a strange rhythm of hope and hardship. They rationed food, shared stories, and maintained their health as best as possible. The silica dust gnawed at their lungs, and despite the masks, persistent coughs echoed through the quiet halls. Emily's scientific background pushed her to monitor symptoms and improvise remedies, but she knew they were fighting an invisible enemy no less deadly than the volcano itself. One afternoon, as Emily calibrated a makeshift air sensor in the filtration room, she received a faint, static-laden radio transmission. "This is Station Echo. Anyone out there? Coordinates, 41.2 north, 111.8 west. We have supplies and medical aid. Repeat, supplies and medical aid available." Her heart jumped. She scrambled to reply, voice trembling, "This is Survivor Group Alpha. We copy Station Echo. Coordinates confirmed. Requesting assistance." The line crackled and went silent. Moments later, a burst of static returned, "Help is coming. Hold tight." Relief washed over the group like a sudden spring rain in a parched desert. For the first time since the eruption, a tangible hope pierced the heavy fog of despair. Over the next days, they prepared for contact, repairing radios and mapping their location. Emily sent out messages on every frequency she could find, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. But the ash storm did not relent. Outside, the world remained a bleak wasteland, skies forever coated in the fine glass dust that turned sunlight to dim twilight. The longer they stayed, the more Emily observed the toll on everyone's spirits. Jake grew quieter, his usual optimism replaced by grim determination. Marcus spent hours scanning the horizon, his geologist's eyes searching for signs of stability beneath the chaos. Lily clung to her drawings, her innocence a fragile shield against the harsh reality. One evening, as the group gathered in the filtered air room, Emily spoke quietly, "We're not just fighting nature anymore. We're fighting time and ourselves. This ashfall will last months, maybe years. We have to adapt, not just survive." Jake nodded. "What's our plan? We can't wait forever for rescue." Emily paused. "We rebuild. We learn how to live in this new world. Use the knowledge we have, find clean water sources, grow food indoors, protect our lungs." Marcus chimed in, "I know a place. An underground mine not far from here. It might offer better shelter from the ash and toxic air." The idea sparked a flicker of excitement. An underground refuge could be a sanctuary, a place to regroup and perhaps start rebuilding a semblance of life. Preparations began immediately. They gathered supplies, mapped the route, and planned carefully to minimize exposure. The day of departure was tense. The ash was thicker than ever, swirling in ghostly eddies that made the journey treacherous. Lily held Emily's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling but determined. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," Emily admitted. "But we have to keep going." The walk to the mine was a test of endurance. They navigated collapsed buildings, crossed dried riverbeds, and dodged unstable ash clouds that stung their eyes and choked their lungs. When they finally reached the mine entrance, a yawning cavern carved into the mountainside, relief flooded through them. The darkness inside was cold but clean, the air breathable with the help of portable filters Marcus carried. They set up camp in the mine's lower tunnels, lighting lamps and arranging the space to be livable. The underground was a world apart, a silence broken only by dripping water and their own cautious movements. In this shelter, away from the relentless ashfall, they began to feel a fragile hope take root. Emily organized daily routines, monitoring air quality, rationing food, maintaining communication equipment. The mine's cool temperatures preserved some of their remaining supplies, and Lily's drawings now included scenes of underground life, safe, hidden, waiting for the sun. But even here, the psychological weight was heavy. The darkness pressed in, and the knowledge that outside, the world was still under siege by the volcanic aftermath gnawed at them. One night, Jake confessed to Emily, "I keep thinking about the people we left behind. The cities swallowed by ash, families lost, the world changed forever." Emily looked at him, the exhaustion and grief mirrored in her own eyes. "We can't save everyone. But we can survive. We can be the ones who build the future." Days turned into weeks. The group adapted to their subterranean existence, creating makeshift gardens with hydroponic systems and recycled water. Emily worked tirelessly to document everything: the chemical changes in the soil, the effects of low light on plants, the impact of silica on human health. They shared stories and memories, holding on to their humanity in the face of overwhelming loss. One afternoon, the radio crackled again. A voice, clearer this time, announced, "This is Station Echo. Supply drops are scheduled within the next week. Hold your position and maintain communication." The promise of help lifted their spirits, but also brought new challenges, hope mingled with the fear of disappointment. Emily understood the fragile balance. They had survived the eruption, the ash, the fallout. Now, they faced the slow, painful work of rebuilding lives in a world forever changed. As she watched Lily playing with a small sprout growing under the flickering lamp, Emily felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. This was no longer just survival. It was a fight for the future, a future born from ash, but fueled by hope. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The mine was dark and cold, but it held a strange comfort, a womb-like refuge beneath the endless gray skies that had swallowed the surface world. Emily adjusted the dim headlamp strapped to her forehead and moved cautiously along the narrow tunnel, the crunch of gravel underfoot a small reminder that life went on, even here. Outside, the volcanic winter persisted, an unyielding shroud of ash and dust that turned day into twilight and suffocated all that lived. Inside, they had found something precious: silence, safety, and a chance to listen. That night, as the group gathered around the flickering lanterns, the radios crackled to life again with a burst of static. "This is Station Echo. We are coordinating supply drops and medical teams. Please confirm location and condition." Emily's voice was steady but tired as she responded, "This is Survivor Group Alpha, located in the old mine tunnels near the northern ridge. Conditions are stable but supplies are running low. Awaiting assistance." The crackling reply brought a spark of hope. They weren't alone. The days that followed saw a renewed effort to improve their underground home. Using salvaged materials, they reinforced walls, created better ventilation, and expanded hydroponic gardens. Jake's engineering skills shone as he rigged together air filters from discarded parts and designed a rainwater catchment system that could collect and purify water seeping through the rock. Marcus mapped the surrounding tunnels, searching for minerals and safe zones, while Emily documented everything, aware that their experiences could serve future survivors or even help scientists understand the disaster's long-term effects. Lily's drawings, once whimsical images of a lost world, grew more detailed: maps of the mine, sketches of their daily routines, and portraits of the people who shared their fate. Despite the harsh conditions, the group bonded in a way Emily had never expected. Strangers became family, and the mine's oppressive darkness was pierced by laughter, shared meals, and whispered stories. But beneath this fragile hope, danger lurked. The ash was relentless, an invisible enemy that continued to corrode lungs and strain spirits. Emily noticed subtle changes in Jake's breathing, the tightness that crept into Marcus's movements, and the fatigue that seemed to shadow Lily's eyes. She pushed herself harder to find remedies, scouring the old medical books they had salvaged and experimenting with natural herbs they managed to grow. One evening, as the group gathered in the main chamber, a tremor shook the mine, dust falling from the ceiling and hearts racing in unison. "It's not over," Marcus said grimly. "The earth is still restless." They realized that while the surface world lay buried under ash, the earth beneath them was far from calm. More seismic activity meant their underground refuge could become a trap. Emily grappled with the terrifying thought that their sanctuary might turn into a tomb. She knew they had to prepare for evacuation, but where could they go? The ashfall stretched endlessly, and the skies remained a permanent haze. Then, a new voice came over the radio, clearer and more urgent than before. "This is a rescue team from Station Echo. We have medical supplies and evacuation plans. Coordinates for extraction will be sent shortly. Hold your position." Relief and tension mingled. The promise of rescue was a light at the end of the tunnel, but they had to survive until then. Days stretched into nights, the boundaries between them blurring in the subterranean gloom. Emily found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them here, from the first fiery explosion beneath Yellowstone, through the nightmare of ash storms, to this underground community fighting for survival. Memories of the surface, of green trees and open skies, haunted her dreams. She clung to the thought that one day the sun would shine again, the earth would heal, and life would return. Yet the present demanded vigilance. Food supplies were still limited, and the psychological toll was mounting. Lily grew quieter, her sketches darker, and Emily worried about the child's fragile hope. One night, Lily confided, "Will we ever see the stars again?" Emily hugged her close. "I don't know, sweetie. But we'll make sure you do." The following morning, Marcus discovered something unexpected, a small cavern off the main tunnel filled with ancient fossils and crystals shimmering in the lamplight. "This place is a time capsule," he said, awe in his voice. "It reminds us that life endures through cataclysms." Inspired, the group named the cavern the Sanctuary, and began restoring it as a place of calm and reflection amid the struggle. Here, Emily found the strength to keep going, fueled by the resilience of life itself. Then came the extraction coordinates. A risky journey to a nearby clearing where a helicopter rescue was scheduled to land. They prepared as best they could, packing essentials and marking their path through the labyrinthine tunnels. The day of the evacuation dawned cold and gray. As they emerged from the mine, the sky greeted them with the same oppressive ash clouds, but beneath their masks, determination burned bright. The helicopter's distant thump was a sound they had longed to hear, a promise of connection to a world still fighting to survive. One by one, they climbed aboard, eyes filled with tears and relief. As the rotor blades lifted them above the ash-covered wasteland, Emily looked down at the world she had known and lost, a world buried beneath a silent fallout. The rescue was just the beginning. Ahead lay new challenges, rebuilding communities, healing bodies and minds, and facing the uncertain future of a planet forever changed by Yellowstone's wrath. But as the helicopter soared through the silica skies, Emily felt a quiet conviction: no matter what came next, the voices beneath the ash had been heard. They would carry their story forward, a testament to endurance, hope, and the unbreakable will to survive. The helicopter's rotor wash stirred up clouds of ash as it descended toward the makeshift relief camp, a sprawling network of tents and temporary shelters pitched on the edge of a once thriving valley now choked by volcanic fallout. Emily felt a knot of apprehension mixed with hope twisting in her stomach. The world outside was alien, a landscape painted in shades of gray and silence, but the camp buzzed with the energy of survival, the hum of generators, the murmur of voices, the hurried footsteps of people rebuilding from the ashes. As the aircraft touched down, she helped Lily out first, shielding her from the fine dust swirling in the wind. Jake and Marcus followed, faces grim but relieved. They had survived the underground ordeal, but now came the true test, reintegration into a fractured society struggling to heal. The camp's leader, a woman named Captain Sarah Reynolds, greeted them with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "Welcome to Fort Hope," she said. "It's not much, but it's a start." Emily surveyed the camp with wary eyes. Rows of tents, medical stations, supply depots, and a small field where children played under dust masks. The ash still fell lightly, but here they had filtration systems and clean water. It was a fragile oasis. The days blurred into a cycle of intake interviews, medical checkups, and coordination meetings. Emily was quickly put to work as a scientific advisor, sharing her data on the ash's effects and helping develop health protocols. Jake assisted engineers in repairing solar arrays, and Marcus began surveying the surrounding terrain for signs of stabilization. Lily attended the camp's makeshift school, her laughter a bright spark in the midst of hardship. Despite the routine, Emily felt the weight of loss and uncertainty pressing down. Many refugees shared stories of devastation, families lost, homes buried, livelihoods destroyed. The landscape itself was unrecognizable, a scar on the earth's face. Yet amidst the ruins, seeds of rebirth took root. Local farmers experimented with ash-resistant crops in greenhouses, engineers designed new filtration technologies, and educators crafted lessons on resilience and environmental stewardship. Emily joined a team working to restore the nearby river system, clogged with volcanic debris and toxic sediments. Each small success was a step toward healing, but the scale of the disaster loomed large. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the camp, she overheard a conversation between two scientists about an ominous new development: increased geothermal activity beneath Yellowstone's surface, suggesting that the volcano was far from quiet. The news sent a chill through her. Had they escaped one disaster only to face another? She sought out Marcus, who was poring over seismic data. "It's true," he said grimly. "The magma chamber is restless. There's increased pressure, more frequent tremors. We need to prepare for the possibility of renewed eruptions." Panic rippled through the camp when the news spread, but Captain Reynolds remained calm. "We've survived this long because we face the truth head-on. We prepare, we educate, and we rebuild." Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She began leading workshops on emergency preparedness, teaching people how to recognize early warning signs and build safe shelters. Jake helped design evacuation routes and communication networks. Lily, too, found her role, organizing art projects that allowed children to express their fears and hopes. Weeks turned into months. The ash settled, and a tentative green began to emerge beneath the gray blanket. Scientists monitored the volcano continuously, emergency systems were improved, and the community grew stronger. Emily formed close bonds with fellow survivors, their shared trauma forging deep connections. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting a golden glow over the valley, Emily stood with Jake and Lily at the edge of a small garden where wildflowers bloomed stubbornly through the ash. "We're not just survivors," she said softly. "We're builders of a new world." Jake smiled, pulling her close. "And we'll face whatever comes next, together." Lily looked up at the sky, now tinged with color for the first time in months. "Do you think the stars are back?" she asked. Emily nodded, tears glistening. "Yes, sweetheart. They're back." Life was fragile, uncertain, and forever changed, but amidst the ruins, there was rebirth, proof that even after the darkest nights, hope could bloom like a flower through the ash. The fragile peace at Fort Hope was shattered one early morning when the ground trembled beneath their feet, a low, ominous rumble that grew into a roar echoing through the valley. Emily was at the water purification station when the first tremor hit. She steadied herself against the metal pipe, heart pounding as the earth shook violently. Outside, People screamed and scrambled for cover as dust and small rocks rained down from the sky. "It's happening again," Jake shouted, his voice edged with fear and urgency. Marcus appeared moments later, pale and wide-eyed. "The magma chamber is shifting faster than we thought. We need to evacuate, now." Panic spread like wildfire as the community mobilized. Emergency sirens blared through the camp, orders barked by leaders trained for this nightmare yet never truly prepared for its reality. Emily grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her close. "Stay calm, Lily. We're going to get through this." The evacuation was chaotic but swift. Families, elders, children, all moved towards the designated safe zones on higher ground, away from the expanding ash clouds and potential lava flows. The ash, once a distant threat, now fell thicker, heavier, suffocating the air and obscuring visibility. Emily's lungs burned beneath her mask, but adrenaline pushed her forward. The landscape outside Fort Hope was transforming rapidly, trees blackened and snapped, rivers boiling, and the sky glowing an eerie orange as plumes of smoke and fire erupted from Yellowstone's caldera. Helicopters hovered overhead, coordinating rescue efforts and ferrying the most vulnerable to distant shelters. Marcus stayed behind to assist with monitoring equipment, gathering critical data to predict the eruption's next phase. Emily begged him to leave, but he shook his head. "Someone has to stay. We can't lose the information we've worked so hard to collect." As night fell, the camp was reduced to scattered groups huddling on hilltops, their faces illuminated by the fiery sky. Emily wrapped a blanket around Lily and sat silently, her mind racing. She thought of everything they had survived, the initial eruption, the suffocating ash, the underground mine, and now this new inferno threatening to consume what little was left. The next morning brought grim news. The volcanic activity had intensified overnight, triggering landslides and flooding in surrounding areas. Roads were impassable, communication lines severed. Supplies were running dangerously low. Yet amidst the devastation, Emily found moments of profound human resilience. She watched as volunteers organized medical aid, engineers repaired damaged infrastructure, and children shared stories to keep spirits alive. Jake worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts to clear debris and establish new shelters. Marcus sent regular updates despite the deteriorating conditions, his voice steady and reassuring. One evening, Emily sat beside the glowing embers of a campfire, her thoughts drifting to the future. "How do we keep going?" she whispered to Jake. He took her hand, his grip firm. "By remembering why we fight, for our families, for our home, for a chance to rebuild." The eruption's fury gradually subsided after several grueling weeks, but its scars remained. The land was reshaped, communities displaced, and countless lives forever changed. Yet in the ashes, seeds of hope were planted. Scientists from around the world converged to study the aftermath, bringing resources and expertise. Aid agencies established permanent bases, and survivors like Emily became leaders in the rebuilding process. Slowly, green shoots pierced the blackened earth, rivers cleared, and skies brightened. Emily returned to Fort Hope, now a hub of recovery and renewal. She stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, the sun warming her face as she breathed deeply. The journey was far from over, but she believed in their strength. In the end, the echoes of fire had tested them all, but had not broken their spirit. Life, fragile and fierce, endured. The sun was just beginning to pierce the heavy veil of ash lingering in the sky as Emily stepped outside the rebuilt community center at Fort Hope. The air was still thick with dust, but the faint warmth on her skin felt like a promise of change. Around her, people bustled with purpose, repairing homes, tending gardens, teaching children. It was a scene of quiet determination, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be defeated by disaster. Emily's thoughts drifted back to the months since the Yellowstone eruption had thrown their lives into chaos. From the first violent shakes beneath the earth to the suffocating ash storms, then the underground refuge and finally the long, grueling recovery, they had endured more than anyone should have to. But here, in this fragile new world, hope was taking root. As she walked through the camp, Emily spotted Jake overseeing a group of volunteers repairing solar panels. His usual calm demeanor was shadowed by exhaustion, but his eyes sparkled with the same unwavering resolve that had kept them alive underground. She approached him, the dirt and ash on their clothes a shared badge of survival. "How are things holding up?" she asked. Jake wiped sweat from his brow and smiled wearily. "Better every day. The new panels are generating enough power to light the whole camp and run the water pumps. We're even starting to plan for expansion." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of pride. Their work was more than just survival, it was building a future. Nearby, Marcus was coordinating a team clearing volcanic debris from the old riverbeds, essential to restoring water flow to the valley. He greeted Emily with a tired but hopeful grin. "The land is responding. The rivers are starting to run clearer, and the vegetation is slowly coming back." She exchanged a glance with him, both aware that recovery was a marathon, not a sprint. Lily ran up, clutching a bundle of wildflowers she had picked from the edge of a newly green patch of earth. Her laughter was a bright melody in the stillness. "Look, Mom. They're growing again." Emily knelt to hug her daughter, tears prickling her eyes. "Yes, baby, they are." That evening, the community gathered for a ceremony to honor those lost and to celebrate their resilience. Under a sky streaked with stars, people shared stories, sang songs, and lit candles that flickered like tiny beacons of hope. Emily spoke to the crowd, her voice steady despite the emotion welling inside. "We've been through fire and ash, darkness and despair. But we are here, together, stronger than ever. This land is our home, and we will rebuild it, not just for ourselves, but for those who will come after us." The crowd erupted in applause, a chorus of determination echoing into the night. Over the following weeks, the pace of rebuilding accelerated. New homes rose from the ash, schools reopened, and farmers cultivated fields with hardy crops resistant to volcanic soil. Scientists established a permanent research station, dedicated to monitoring Yellowstone and developing disaster preparedness strategies. Emily found herself at the heart of these efforts, bridging the gap between survivors and experts. She worked tirelessly, driven by the lessons learned through loss and survival. Yet, despite the progress, she knew the shadow of Yellowstone still loomed large. The volcano was alive beneath the surface, its power a reminder of nature's unpredictability. One afternoon, while reviewing seismic data with Marcus, a new anomaly appeared, an unusual spike deep within the magma chamber. "It's not an eruption," Marcus explained, "but it means Yellowstone's activity is increasing. We need to stay vigilant." The news rippled through the community, reminding everyone that recovery did not mean complacency. Plans were revised, emergency drills conducted, and communication networks strengthened. Emily often found herself reflecting on the fragile balance between hope and caution. She understood that true resilience meant preparing for the worst while believing in the best. Life at Fort Hope became a blend of rebuilding and readiness, a testament to the human capacity to adapt. In quiet moments, Emily would walk the paths near the camp, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains, the sky a brilliant tapestry of color after so many days of ash-gray gloom. She thought of the journey they had taken, the losses endured, the bonds forged, and the future they were shaping. Lily's hand in hers was a constant reminder of why they fought to rise from the ashes. Their story was one of survival, but also of renewal. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Emily whispered a promise to the night: no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The earth had tested them, but they had answered with courage, compassion, and hope. The fire that once threatened to consume them had instead sparked a new beginning. The fragile horizon stretched out before Emily as she stood at the edge of the rebuilt valley, watching the sun rise over the scorched landscape that was slowly healing beneath the golden light. The ash that had once suffocated the earth was beginning to fade into memory, replaced by soft green shoots pushing their way through the soil. Life was returning, but the scars of Yellowstone's wrath were etched deeply into the land, and into the hearts of those who survived. The camp at Fort Hope had transformed from a desperate refuge into a vibrant community, a beacon of resilience amidst uncertainty. Yet Emily felt a persistent tension beneath the surface, a reminder that nature's fury was never fully tamed. As she walked back toward the heart of the camp, she passed families tending their gardens, children playing with dirt-streaked faces, and scientists busy with their instruments. Each step was a testament to survival and a commitment to rebuilding. Jake was waiting by the solar array, his face serious as he reviewed the day's progress. "We're making good strides," he said, nodding toward the panels now generating steady power. "But supply lines are still fragile. We can't afford any more setbacks." Emily agreed. The community depended on every piece of technology, every ration of food and water. They had learned how quickly things could unravel. Marcus joined them, carrying a tablet with the latest seismic readings. "There's been an uptick in tremors overnight, nothing critical yet, but it's a reminder that Yellowstone is still very much alive." Emily felt the familiar tightening in her chest. "We've rebuilt, but the threat hasn't gone away." The three exchanged looks of determination mixed with unease. That evening, the community gathered for a planning session led by Captain Reynolds, focusing on disaster preparedness and sustainable growth. Maps were spread out, evacuation routes refined, and communication systems tested. Emily contributed her expertise, emphasizing the importance of education and psychological support for survivors. Lily sat nearby, sketching the scene with bright colors, her innocence a stark contrast to the heavy discussions. After the meeting, Emily took a moment to speak with Captain Reynolds in private. "How do you keep hope alive for everyone?" she asked. Reynolds smiled wistfully. "By reminding them that every day we rebuild, we're reclaiming our future. Fear is natural, but it can't rule us." Emily nodded, inspired by the leader's strength. Days turned into weeks, and the camp continued to flourish. Schools reopened, markets sprang up, and festivals celebrated the fragile beauty of life returning. Yet, beneath the celebrations, Emily remained vigilant. The Earth's rumblings were a constant reminder of the fine line between hope and disaster. One morning, a sudden quake shook the valley harder than usual, rattling windows and sending people running outdoors. Emergency sirens wailed as trained responders moved quickly to check on the community. Emily found herself in the middle of the chaos, coordinating medical teams and reassuring frightened families. The quake was a wake-up call, a jolt back to reality. But it also strengthened their resolve. They could not control the volcano, but they could control how they faced it, together. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy calm, Emily sat with Lily under a starry sky. "Do you think the stars will stay with us now?" the child asked softly. Emily smiled, brushing ash-dusted hair from Lily's face. "I believe they will. And so will we." In the months that followed, the community adapted. They built stronger shelters, diversified food sources, and expanded education programs focused on environmental stewardship. Scientists and engineers collaborated closely with residents, sharing knowledge and technology. Emily found purpose in bridging these worlds, advocating for the people's needs while advancing understanding of the natural forces shaping their lives. The scars on the land remained visible, the blackened trees, the altered riverbeds, but so did the signs of renewal. Wildflowers bloomed in unexpected places, and birdsong returned to the air. The valley was healing, slowly but surely. One afternoon, Emily stood at the edge of a small forest grove, watching a family of deer cautiously graze among the new growth. The sight filled her with hope and a deep sense of connection. "We're part of this land's story," she thought. "Its pain, its strength, its rebirth." Yet the fragile horizon reminded her that vigilance was essential. The earth beneath their feet was alive and unpredictable. They had learned that survival required respect for nature's power, humility in the face of uncertainty, and a commitment to community. As dusk fell, Emily returned to the camp, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but the people of Fort Hope had proven they could rise from the ashes, not just to survive, but to thrive. The fragile horizon stretched wide, holding both danger and promise, and Emily embraced it with open arms. The night was deceptively quiet, the stars sparkling above like distant watchful eyes, but beneath the surface, unseen forces churned with restless energy. Emily lay awake in her small cabin at Fort Hope, the faint vibrations beneath the ground stirring a deep unease within her. Despite months of rebuilding and cautious optimism, Yellowstone was reminding them that its power was far from spent. She rose silently, careful not to wake Lily, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The camp was peaceful, tents darkened, only the soft glow of emergency lights piercing the darkness. Emily's thoughts drifted back to the countless tremors recorded by the seismic teams, small, subtle shifts that most wouldn't notice but which spoke volumes to those who listened. She walked toward the research station where Marcus was stationed, tapping lightly on the door until he opened, bleary-eyed but alert. "Emily," he said with a tired smile, "what brings you out here at this hour?" She gestured toward the horizon. "I felt something. The ground, it's restless again." Marcus nodded, pulling up the latest data on his tablet. "There's been an increase in low-frequency tremors all day. Deep below, the magma is moving, but it's not eruptive activity, more like the volcano adjusting, rebalancing." They stood in silence, the weight of the Earth's hidden rhythms pressing on them. "How long can it go on like this?" Emily asked softly. "Weeks? Months? Years?" Marcus shrugged. "It's impossible to say. Yellowstone is unpredictable. That's what makes it so dangerous, and fascinating." The next morning, Emily convened a meeting with community leaders, scientists, and emergency responders. The news was unsettling but not unexpected. The volcano was entering a phase of heightened subterranean activity, increasing the likelihood of future eruptions. Captain Reynolds spoke with calm authority. "Our priority is preparedness. We've rebuilt with resilience in mind, but we must remain vigilant and ready to act." Emily presented a proposal to expand monitoring systems and enhance evacuation drills, emphasizing the importance of psychological support for residents coping with ongoing uncertainty. The community responded with a mix of determination and anxiety. Many had lost so much already, the prospect of another disaster was daunting. But the spirit of Fort Hope was unyielding. Over the following weeks, tremors continued, their frequency and intensity fluctuating unpredictably. Emily spent long hours analyzing data, coordinating with experts worldwide, and refining emergency protocols. Jake led teams reinforcing infrastructure, while Marcus delved deeper into geophysical research, seeking clues to the volcano's behavior. Lily adapted as best she could, her youthful resilience a beacon amid the tension. She painted pictures of hope and strength, her art displayed prominently in the community center. One afternoon, as Emily reviewed seismic reports, an urgent alert flashed on her screen. An unusual swarm of earthquakes clustered beneath the southern rim of Yellowstone. The pattern suggested magma was migrating toward the surface. The camp mobilized immediately. Sirens sounded, emergency communications blared, and evacuation orders were issued. Panic flickered at the edges but was tempered by the community's training and cohesion. Emily held Lily's hand tightly as they joined the procession moving toward safer ground. The ground beneath them rumbled ominously, a reminder of nature's immense power. After several tense hours, the activity subsided. No eruption occurred, but the warning was clear: Yellowstone's unrest was escalating. In the days that followed, a mixture of relief and apprehension settled over Fort Hope. The near miss had tested their readiness, reinforcing the need for constant vigilance. Emily found herself counseling neighbors overwhelmed by fear, encouraging them to focus on their collective strength. "We face uncertainty," she told them, "but we do not face it alone." The psychological toll was real and pervasive. Sleepless nights, flashbacks to past disasters, and the ever-present anxiety of what might come next weighed heavily. Emily coordinated support groups and brought in mental health professionals to help the community heal not only physically but emotionally. One evening, as she sat beside the fire pit with Jake and Marcus, they reflected on the fragile balance between hope and fear. "We've come so far," Jake said, staring into the flames. "But sometimes it feels like we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop." Marcus nodded. "That's the reality of living in Yellowstone's shadow. But every day we prepare, we lessen the impact. Knowledge and community are our best defenses." Emily felt a surge of resolve. "We'll keep building, learning, and supporting each other. No matter what comes, we'll face it together." As the months passed, Fort Hope became a model of resilience, blending science, community, and compassion. The people adapted to the constant hum of unseen tremors, finding strength in solidarity. Emily watched Lily grow, her laughter and curiosity a daily reminder of life's enduring spark. Yet, the Earth's restlessness persisted, a silent force beneath their feet, reminding them of the delicate line between survival and catastrophe. One crisp autumn morning, as Emily reviewed data at the research station, an urgent call came through. New signs of magma movement indicated an increased risk of eruption within weeks. The community braced once again, ready to face the unknown with courage and unity. In that moment, Emily understood the profound truth of their journey. Life was fragile and unpredictable, but it was also a gift, one worth fighting for, every single day. The world beneath Yellowstone's surface was a secret realm of fire and pressure, an unseen landscape where molten rock churned in vast chambers miles below the Earth's crust. Emily often found herself fascinated and unsettled by this hidden world, a reminder of both the planet's raw power and the fragility of human existence perched above it. That morning, as she arrived at the research station, Marcus was already deep into analyzing new seismic data streaming in from the latest network of sensors. The room hummed with quiet activity, monitors displaying graphs and 3D models of magma movement, computers crunching numbers that told a story invisible to the naked eye. Marcus looked up, eyes bright with urgency. "Emily, the magma plume beneath the caldera is shifting faster than before. It's expanding and creating new fractures in the rock." She leaned over his shoulder, absorbing the complexity of the information. "Is this a sign of an impending eruption?" "It could be," Marcus replied cautiously. "But predicting volcanic behavior is like trying to forecast the ocean's tides, it's influenced by countless variables." The team had been monitoring Yellowstone's restless heart for months, yet the volcano remained unpredictable, a sleeping giant with a mind of its own. Emily felt a familiar mix of fear and determination. "What can we do to prepare?" Marcus pointed to a map detailing critical fault lines and vulnerable zones. "We need to expand evacuation plans, strengthen early warning systems, and educate the community about what to expect." The stakes were high. An eruption could unleash catastrophic consequences, ash clouds disrupting air travel across continents, pyroclastic flows wiping out ecosystems, rivers choked with debris. But Emily also knew that hope lay in knowledge, preparation, and unity. Over the following days, Emily and Marcus coordinated with national agencies, sharing data and refining response strategies. They organized workshops in Fort Hope, teaching residents how to recognize warning signs and respond calmly under pressure. Jake led engineering teams reinforcing infrastructure, ensuring shelters were stocked and communication lines robust. Despite the looming threat, daily life continued. Children played in the newly planted fields, families gathered for meals, and music floated on the evening breeze, a reminder that even in the shadow of danger, life persisted. Yet beneath the surface of normalcy, tension simmered. The Earth's restlessness was a constant undercurrent, a reminder that their world could shift in an instant. One afternoon, Emily joined Marcus on a field expedition to inspect a newly formed fissure near the edge of the park. The ground was cracked and steaming, sulfurous gases rising in swirling clouds. The landscape looked alien. Scorched earth meeting vibrant patches of green where new life was stubbornly emerging. "This fissure wasn't here last month," Marcus said, kneeling to take samples. It's evidence of the magma's movement, carving new paths underground. Emily touched the cool rock, feeling the earth's pulse beneath her fingertips. It's beautiful and terrifying all at once. They returned to camp as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in fiery reds and purples. Emily reflected on the delicate balance between destruction and creation that defined Yellowstone. The same forces that could raise the valley to ash also gave birth to new landscapes, new ecosystems. Back at the research station, the team analyzed the samples, searching for clues to the volcano's next moves. Data revealed increased gas emissions and shifting seismic patterns, signs that the magma was not only moving but also interacting with underground water sources, creating pressure that could trigger explosive activity. The reality settled heavily over everyone involved. Plans were accelerated, emergency drills intensified, and supply caches expanded. Emily felt the weight of responsibility keenly. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death for her community. As night fell, she sat alone outside her cabin, staring up at the stars, trying to find solace in their steady light. She thought of Lily sleeping inside, innocent and unaware of the peril looming beneath their feet. The next morning, a sudden tremor shook the valley, stronger than any before. Alarms blared as the ground cracked and hot steam hissed from new vents. The community sprang into action, evacuation routes opened, medical teams deployed, communication lines buzzing with activity. Emily led the charge, her voice steady and commanding despite the fear gnawing at her. Move quickly but carefully. Help those who need assistance. The hours stretched painfully as they waited for the earth to settle. Thankfully, the eruption was limited, no lava flows, no massive ash clouds, just a release of pressure beneath the surface. It was a warning, a reminder that Yellowstone's heart was still beating fiercely. In the aftermath, the community gathered to assess the damage and regroup. Relief mingled with apprehension. They had dodged a bullet, but the threat remained. Emily's resolve deepened. This volcano is a force beyond us, but it doesn't define us. We choose how we respond. Over the following weeks, monitoring efforts intensified. New sensors were installed, and remote drones scouted the volatile areas, feeding real-time data back to the research station. The partnership between scientists and residents grew stronger, bound by shared purpose. Emily found strength in this collective effort, a living example of resilience born from vulnerability. As winter approached, the valley transformed again. Snow blanketed the recovering landscape, muffling the sounds of daily life but not the underlying tension. In the quiet moments, Emily reflected on their journey, the losses endured, the hope kindled, and the unyielding spirit that bound them together. Yellowstone was a reminder that nature's power was immense and unpredictable. But so was humanity's capacity to endure, adapt, and rebuild. Standing at the edge of the valley, looking out over the snow-dusted land, Emily whispered a promise to the earth itself: we will face whatever comes, together. The shadows of uncertainty stretched long over Fort Hope as winter deepened, wrapping the valley in a cold silence that contrasted sharply with the restless energy beneath the surface. Emily moved through the snow-covered camp with purpose, her breath misting in the crisp air as she checked on families, shared news updates, and coordinated efforts to keep morale high. The harsh season tested them in new ways, isolated from the outside world, resources strained by the cold, and the ever-present threat of Yellowstone's underground turmoil weighing heavily on everyone's minds. Despite the challenges, a resilient light flickered in the community's heart. Around the warmth of makeshift fires and crowded tents, stories were told, songs sung, and hope nurtured like fragile seedlings breaking through frozen ground. Emily often found herself drawn to the small community center, where Lily and other children gathered to learn and play, their laughter a vital counterpoint to the tension that permeated the air. One evening, as snowflakes drifted softly outside, Emily sat with Jake and Marcus reviewing the latest seismic data. "The Earth is still shifting," Marcus said, tapping on his tablet. "There are deeper magmatic pulses now, indicating that the volcano's internal plumbing is changing." Jake frowned. "Does that mean we should expect an eruption soon?" Marcus shook his head. We can't be sure. But the pattern suggests that Yellowstone is moving into a more active phase. Emily's eyes met theirs, the weight of their responsibility pressing down like the heavy snow outside. We have to keep preparing. The community depends on us. In the following days, Emily intensified efforts to strengthen ties between scientists and residents. She organized workshops blending scientific knowledge with practical survival skills, empowering people to act confidently in a crisis. Trust grew as expertise met lived experience, creating a network of care and vigilance. Yet beneath the surface, fears lingered. In quiet moments, Emily grappled with her own doubts, the uncertainty about the future, the safety of those she loved, the daunting challenge of leading a community through an unpredictable disaster. One afternoon, as she walked through the village, she encountered Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly woman whose home had survived the previous eruption but whose spirit was worn thin. Emily, she said softly, I'm scared. What if it happens again? What if we lose everything? Emily took her hands gently. I understand. We all feel that fear. But remember, we're not alone. We've built a family here, stronger together. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, tears glistening. Your strength gives me hope. Moments like these fueled Emily's resolve. She knew that leadership wasn't just about plans and protocols, it was about compassion, connection, and inspiring courage. Winter deepened, and with it came a new challenge. The cold snap caused a critical power failure, threatening heating systems and communication networks. Panic flickered as temperatures dropped dangerously low, but the community sprang into action. Jake's team repaired solar arrays and generators with ingenuity born of necessity, while volunteers distributed blankets and warm meals. Emily coordinated emergency shelters, ensuring no one was left vulnerable. The crisis tested their resilience but also illuminated their unity. In the quiet aftermath, Emily found herself reflecting on the fragile balance between shadow and light, the fear that shadowed their lives and the hope that illuminated their path. One night, as snow fell softly outside, she sat beside Lily's bed, watching the child sleep peacefully despite the turmoil outside. We're going to be okay, Emily whispered, promising not just to her daughter but to herself. The coming spring brought thaw and renewal, but also new signs of Yellowstone's unrest. Seismic activity increased, and steam vents hissed louder. Scientists warned that an eruption was increasingly likely, though timing remained uncertain. The community braced once more, hearts heavy yet hopeful. Emily continued to lead with strength and grace, her vision clear, to protect, to prepare, and to nurture the fragile light of life amid shadows. In this dance between destruction and rebirth, she found a deeper understanding of what it meant to live with uncertainty, to face fears without surrendering to them. As the sun broke through the melting snow, casting golden light over the valley, Emily stood on a ridge overlooking Fort Hope. The landscape was scarred but healing, alive with possibility. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with unknowns. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Together, they would face whatever came, finding strength in shadow and light alike. The days that followed the thaw brought a deceptive calm over Fort Hope. The snow melted into streams that fed the swollen river winding through the valley, birds returned with tentative songs, and buds appeared on the trees, hinting at the promise of new life. Yet beneath this surface of renewal, the earth continued its restless dance. Emily sensed the tension tightening like a drawn wire, the volcano's subtle rumblings echoing through every corner of the community. Scientists tracked increased magma movement deep below, and while no eruption was imminent, the warnings were clear: Yellowstone was gearing up, preparing for a reckoning that could come at any moment. The town was a blend of cautious hope and quiet apprehension. Residents went about their routines, farmers tended to spring planting, children played in the warming sun, but always with an eye toward the horizon, alert to the slightest change in the earth's mood. Emily dedicated herself to balancing hope and preparedness, knowing that panic would only fracture the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to build. At the research station, Marcus and his team worked around the clock. New sensor arrays were deployed to capture even the faintest tremors, drones surveyed the shifting landscape, and advanced computer models simulated possible eruption scenarios. "We're as ready as we can be," Marcus told Emily one afternoon, eyes tired but determined. "The volcano is unpredictable, but our technology gives us a fighting chance." Emily nodded, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was at stake. She had seen firsthand the devastation Yellowstone could unleash, but she also believed in the resilience of her community, their ability to endure, rebuild, and rise again. The emergency response teams drilled relentlessly, practicing evacuation routes, medical triage, and communication protocols. Jake coordinated infrastructure checks, reinforcing bridges, roads, and shelters. Families prepared emergency kits, stockpiled supplies, and held conversations about what to do if disaster struck. Yet even with all this preparation, an undercurrent of anxiety ran deep. One evening, Emily met with community elders in the town hall, the wooden beams creaking softly as they shared stories of past eruptions and survival. Mrs. Alvarez spoke with quiet wisdom. "We've been through darkness before," she said. "The earth tests us, but we must never lose our faith in each other." Her words settled over the room like a bomb, reminding everyone that the strength of Fort Hope lay not just in plans and technology but in the bonds of trust and compassion. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. Emily stood on the porch of her cabin, watching as the stars emerged one by one. She thought of Lily asleep inside, dreaming of a future free from fear. She whispered a silent promise to protect that future, no matter the cost. Then came the subtle signs that shattered the calm. Minor earthquakes rattled the valley, gas emissions increased, and steam vents hissed more aggressively. The earth beneath their feet was shifting, slowly, inexorably, toward an uncertain fate. The emergency sirens sounded one morning, cutting through the dawn like a clarion call. The community moved swiftly, evacuating vulnerable areas and taking shelter in reinforced buildings. Emily's voice was steady as she guided families, comforted the frightened, and coordinated resources. Hours stretched into tense days. The volcano's fury remained contained, a restless giant flexing its muscles without striking. Scientists analyzed the data, searching for signs of escalation or retreat. Marcus warned, "This could be the volcano warning us, testing our readiness before the real event." In those tense moments, Emily's faith in her community shone brightest. Volunteers shared supplies, neighbors checked on one another, and the spirit of Fort Hope held strong against the shadow of disaster. Slowly, the earth settled again, the immediate threat passing but the danger far from over. The experience deepened their resolve and their understanding of living with uncertainty. Emily gathered the community for a meeting beneath the open sky. "This is our reality now," she said gently. "We live with a powerful force beneath us, but we face it together. With courage, knowledge, and love." The crowd nodded, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. Spring gave way to summer, and life began to pulse anew across the valley. Flowers bloomed, rivers sparkled, and children's laughter filled the air. Yet Emily knew the calm was fragile, a brief breath before the storm. As she watched the sun set beyond the mountains, she prepared herself for whatever Yellowstone would bring next, ready to lead, to protect, and to inspire hope in the face of the unknown. The morning air was crisp and clear, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred in Fort Hope. Emily stood at the edge of the valley, the vast expanse of Yellowstone stretching before her like a sleeping giant. Beneath that peaceful surface, she knew, ancient forces stirred with a restless energy that no one could fully control or predict. The earth had spoken before, in whispers of tremors and bursts of steam, but today it was about to roar. That first tremor hit just as the sun reached its peak, a deep rumble shaking the ground beneath Emily's feet. Alarms blared across the town, the familiar warning signal piercing through the sudden panic. People scrambled, children were hurried from playgrounds, workers abandoned their tools, families gathered precious belongings. Emily's voice rose above the chaos, steady and commanding. "Stay calm. Follow the evacuation routes. Help each other. She moved swiftly through the streets, checking on neighbors and directing traffic towards safety zones. The ground continued to quake, growing more violent with each passing minute. Buildings trembled, windows shattered, and dust billowed into the air like smoke from a distant fire. The sky darkened as ash began to fall, swirling in cold gusts that carried the scent of sulfur and earth. Emily felt her heart pound, adrenaline surging as she fought to maintain control amid the growing storm. She caught sight of Lily near the community center, eyes wide but brave, clutching her favorite doll. Racing to her side, Emily wrapped an arm around her daughter's trembling shoulders. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, though her own voice wavered. Outside the immediate zone, residents watched in horror as geysers erupted with unprecedented force, jets of scalding water and steam blasting skyward. The ground fractured, sending deep fissures zigzagging across the landscape. Rivers swelled with runoff, and the air filled with a dense cloud of ash that darkened the afternoon like twilight. Emergency teams deployed rapidly, setting up triage stations, directing traffic, and coordinating rescue efforts. Jake worked tirelessly alongside engineers and medical staff, their faces grim but determined. "This is bigger than anything we've faced before," he told Emily, sweat mixing with soot on his brow. "But we're not giving up." The eruption unleashed a series of cascading effects. Power lines snapped, communication towers faltered, and roads crumbled beneath the shifting earth. Yet through it all, the community's spirit held firm, a testament to months of preparation and shared resilience. Amid the turmoil, Emily found moments of quiet courage. She comforted the frightened, reassured the injured, and made impossible decisions with clarity and compassion. Every action was a thread in the fabric of survival they were weaving together. Hours passed like days, the volcanic fury gradually beginning to wane. The ash settled into thick blankets over fields and rooftops, silencing the valley with an eerie stillness. As dusk fell, Emily stood on a ridge overlooking Fort Hope, the town scarred but standing. She thought of the long road ahead, cleanup, rebuilding, healing, but also of the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of disaster. The eruption was a brutal reminder of nature's power and unpredictability, but it also revealed the strength of human courage and community. In the quiet after the storm, Emily gathered her family and neighbors around a fire, sharing stories of survival and hope. "We faced the Earth's fury," she said softly. "And we stood together. That is our true strength." The sky above began to clear, stars emerging like beacons of light in the darkness. Emily looked up, feeling a profound connection to the land beneath and the people beside her. The earth had spoken, and they had listened, learning that even in devastation, life finds a way forward. The days following the eruption unfolded like a slow awakening. Fort Hope lay beneath a blanket of ash and debris, the landscape forever altered but still breathing, still alive. Emily moved through the community with a mixture of exhaustion and determination, witnessing both the scars left by Yellowstone's fury and the quiet stirrings of renewal. Cleanup crews worked tirelessly, clearing roads and restoring essential services. Volunteers distributed food, water, and medical supplies, their faces marked by grit and compassion. Children, wide-eyed but resilient, helped plant seeds in ash-covered soil, their laughter a fragile promise of the future. Emily often found herself at the heart of this rebirth, drawing strength from the people around her. Each story of survival, each act of kindness, was a reminder that even after the darkest nights, dawn would come. The eruption had tested them all, revealing vulnerabilities but also forging unbreakable bonds. Families reunited, friendships deepened, and a sense of shared purpose infused every corner of the valley. At the rebuilt community center, Emily organized workshops on sustainable living, disaster preparedness, and environmental stewardship. She believed that understanding the delicate balance between human life and nature was key to thriving in this new world. Marcus returned from his latest survey with data that confirmed Yellowstone's magma chambers had shifted but were stabilizing for now. "We're not out of the woods," he warned, "but the volcano is resting, at least for the moment." Emily nodded, mindful that their vigilance must never wane. Jake spearheaded infrastructure projects, reinforcing buildings to withstand future tremors and designing systems that could operate independently during crises. Together, they envisioned a community not just rebuilt but transformed, stronger, smarter, and more connected to the land. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Emily stood on a hill overlooking the valley. The sky was painted with hues of gold and lavender, the air carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Lily played nearby, chasing fireflies in the fading light. Emily's heart swelled with gratitude and hope. The journey had been harrowing, filled with loss and fear, but also with profound lessons about resilience, love, and sacrifice. She thought back to the day Yellowstone first rumbled beneath their feet, to the countless moments of struggle and courage that had followed. And she realized that while the Earth's power was immense, it was matched by the strength of the human spirit. As stars began to twinkle overhead, Emily whispered a vow, not just to protect her family and community, but to honor the land that had shaped them all. "We are part of this earth," she said softly. "And together, we will face whatever comes next." The valley breathed around her, alive with possibility. New beginnings stretched out like the horizon before them, a testament to endurance, hope, and the unyielding will to survive and thrive. In the face of nature's greatest challenges, Emily had discovered a truth that would guide her, and her community, for generations to come, that love, unity, and courage are the strongest foundations on which to build a future. As the night deepened, a gentle breeze carried the promise of renewal through the valley. Fort Hope was not just a place on a map, it was a living story of survival, written by those who dared to dream, to rebuild, and to rise again. And Emily, standing there under the vast, starry sky, knew that their story was far from over. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?